Well, welcome to those of you who have joined us for this information session on unscored VCE. My name's Jamie Mason. I'm Assistant Principal Learning and Teaching at the college. I have Andrew Molliker, Director of Pathways, with me as well.
Good evening, everyone.
I guess the first thing to say would be that if you have any questions, you should have the ability to access the Q&A button, and we certainly welcome your questions to be typed into that field, and then at the end of this session we will attempt to answer all of your questions. Excuse me. So I guess, the first thing I wanted to say was that you would have received a letter last week. The reason you got that letter was because we spent a lot of time over the holidays looking at all of our Year 12 students' reports and trying to have a look at students who were perhaps encountering some difficulties with scored assessment. Certainly, we do not, the purpose of the letter was not to kind of railroad you or your son or daughter into unscored, but it was certainly designed to at least give you some information about what might be possible if an ATAR that is not particularly high is achieved. And so we have about 40% of the students, traditionally about 40% of our students do not use an ATAR to find a post-school destination. So we have a large number of students who move from school to TAFE, for example. We have a large number of students who move from our school into an apprenticeship or further training, and they don't require an ATAR. Many students are not suited to scored assessment, particularly examinations. Many students are highly anxious and find that the unscored program does alleviate some of that anxiety. And all of our unscored students over the last 5 or 6 years, I don't want to say all, I would say well over 90% of our unscored students achieve a sustainable post-school destination. And that really is the philosophy behind the program. And you can see that there are lots of different pathways to an achievable and sustainable post-school destination. VCE is one of them, and your son or daughter is going to complete the VCE. Some VCE students go straight from school to a university pathway, and if that's the intention, then the ATAR does become important for 1 year. But a large number of students don't go straight from school to university. They use their VCE to go from school to another institution. As I said, it might be a third-party provider, it might be TAFE, and those students do not require an ATAR. So the ATAR is not the same as achieving the VCE. They're two separate things. Yeah, and as you can see from this slide, some of our students do use the ATAR to get to university. A large number of our students do not use the ATAR. They go to a third-party diploma program, TAFE, and if they complete that TAFE program, or even partially complete that TAFE program, they can then move into either employment or they can move into a university pathway that way. And my next slide, I think, is trying to illustrate that. So the purpose of this really is to say that some students follow the red pathway straight to a degree at university. A large number of students have a more stepped approach to that, which is going from Year 12 to either a Certificate 4 or a diploma. None of those pathways require an ATAR, and once they've completed the Cert 4 or the diploma, they then move into a degree, or they may move from a diploma or a Cert 4 straight into employment. The other thing about the unscored program is that it's a different form of assessment. So at the moment, your son or daughter is no doubt completing scored assessment through SACs, through exams, or through other tasks. Students in the unscored program complete assessment tasks that are designed to show an achievement of a learning outcome, either satisfactory or not satisfactory. They're not scored. They're not ranked against other students. They're just assessed around meeting a learning outcome. As I've said, they're not required to sit examinations, but they are required to complete tasks both in class and at home. And some teachers do require students to complete SACs under modified conditions, which means that they will continue to perhaps sit an end of unit test or SAC, but that won't be scored. It'll be used to determine satisfactory completion or not. I'm now going to hand over to Andrew, who will talk a little bit more about what happens at the end of the year in relation to the UVP students.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. When we move into term 4, we've basically got 2 to 3 weeks where students who are undertaking a scored VCE program are in exam preparation mode. Some of them will be finishing off some scored assessment, but predominantly many of the classes will be preparing themselves for the exams that will be coming up in that term. So the first 2 weeks, what we do is we run an employability skills training program for our unscored students. Now, students are expected to be at school for those 2 weeks, 3 hours a day. And what we're trying to do is provide in that first hour some sort of workshop around making the transition from school and into a workforce, or possibly into a TAFE course or into an apprenticeship. The remaining 2 hours will be devoted towards students completing work that they need to finish for their teachers in order to meet the satisfactory requirements of the VCE certificate. So basically, students will be given a UVP passport, and teachers will touch base with them during that 2-week period where they'll set work that is due or needs to be finished in order for them to meet satisfactory completion. And once they have all signatures in their UVP passport, they'll be given the green light by which to either possibly leave early, or we may be asking them to return back for another week to complete work that hasn't been completed. Because at the end of the day, we want all our students to finish with a full VCE certificate, and that's the aim of this end of year program. So we'll go to the next slide, Jamie. Okay, so those 1 hour workshops that we aim to run over the course of the 2 weeks, we've got around 10 sessions designed with a particular focus. And I've tried to give you a little bit of a description as to what is covered in each of the workshops. The first workshop is aimed at making our students well informed about what the labour market currently looks like, given that we've just gone through this pandemic, and what they can expect and what employers, I suppose, are expecting in terms of the skills that they'll require to take up the jobs that are out there. So the presentation will focus in and around the Victorian labour market and what implications that has for our young people. The second session is a computer generated session where students get to log into a program called My Careers Match. And what this basically does, it takes their personalities, their hobbies, anything else that they have that they're listing as strengths or talents, and basically the computer will basically match them up to a career choice or a pathway that suits the profile that they've actually listed. And by the end of the session, students will receive a digital version of what their profile looks like and some of the jobs that they'd be best suited to. The other session that we do with our students in one of those days is we get them to undertake a resume writing workshop. So by the end of the 2 weeks, we'd love them to come out with a fully typed up, well formatted, modern resume that basically has all the details that's required for them to basically get employment somewhere. Okay. Number 4, part of the resume writing is obviously to write a great application letter, and they'll be given a session where they can produce one of these application letters. They'll look at sample letters, and particularly writing letters that are suited or geared towards particular careers and the way that they're actually formatted. The 5th one there is job interview training. So what we'll do with them is we'll go through the do's and don'ts of what to do at a job interview, how to present, how to greet, how to exit, things around mobile phone protocol, all of those sorts of things that may come up in a job interview. And then we'll basically later in the week give them an opportunity to have a mock interview where they will sit before a panelist and they'll get to go through their technique of what they've learned from this particular session. Session 6 there, we've got a TAFE speaker coming in from RMIT, and they basically give us a perspective of what happens at RMIT if someone's choosing a pathway that happens to go through TAFE or a diploma or advanced diplomas. And as a result, it's all of those courses that don't require an 8R score. Number 7, if we flick the slide, Jamie, part of it too is once they go out into the workforce, they're going to have to be well aware of what superannuation is and what tax is, and things like what a USI number is, and getting their tax number and their TFN number. So we'll give them an opportunity to get those numbers in that session. The other thing that obviously comes up too sometimes is the healthcare cards. That's the other thing that gets spoken about in this particular session. Session number 8 is we tend to focus on apprenticeships and traineeships, and a lot of those apprenticeship and traineeships require our students to undertake a numeracy and literacy test in gaining acceptance into those particular courses. So students will be given the chance to go through a numeracy and literacy test. Session 9, Jamie. Slide.
So I was just going to jump in there, Andrew, and just kind of mention with number 8 there, you know, things like when we're talking about apprenticeship, but also things like nursing, policing, some of those, I guess, softer skills. It's not just apprenticeships and traineeships. So, you know, a number of our students, I think, are heading down maybe a health pathway, for example, nursing. And there's certainly, this is not going to shut the door on those kind of entries.
Later in the week, in the second week, we'll give students undertake a chance, like I said, to go through a mock interview. If we're in lockdown, we will conduct those interviews not face-to-face, but via Zoom. If we are face-to-face, then obviously that would be our preferred choice. And number 10 is we basically then provide each of the students with some feedback as to how they actually went in those interviews, so they can brush up on those skills, and things like body language, eye contact, like I mentioned earlier, the way you greet someone when you enter a room, the way you exit, who you thank. All those things are pretty important in job interviews. Not to mention that, you know, that you can speak clearly and articulate in a timely, in a good fashion. So we'll move on to the next one, Jamie. After that 2 weeks is up, students will be required to undertake an exit interview. Now, this generally happens with one of our careers counsellors, and it's basically to ensure not only that the students have had all the signatures in their passport ticked off, and also they want to get some feedback from the students of how they went with those 10 workshops, but more importantly, to know that each student is exiting with a pathway plan, whether that be going on to an apprenticeship, a traineeship, TAFE, or going straight out into the workforce. So the idea is we collect this data. Our careers counsellors collect what we call destination data about where each of our students actually end up once they've left Sydenham. Okay, so
I'll just jump in there as well and say that the students who are currently in the unscored program, or if your son and daughter was to enter the unscored program, I guess it's giving them, 5 months between now and December, end of December, to really plan their pathway. Some of the problems that we have in December is where students who are in a scored program all of a sudden find that their ATAR is not what they expect it to be, and they're kind of wondering where do they go from here. And we work with those students, but it's a bit more of a scramble. Whereas if students are in the unscored program now, they've got that 4 months, 5 months to really hone their skills, get their applications to TAFE or wherever it else might be underway, and get a real help along that pathway. So I think that is one of the things that you might want to consider if you're thinking about this unscored pathway.
Okay, so if at the end of this presentation, I suppose you've liked what you heard, or you've had the telephone conversations with members of staff from our school around UVP, and it's something now that you're actually interested in, there is an application process. The application process generally starts with collecting a form from the cluster coordinator. These are in your cluster colours. They're in your child's cluster colours, and basically the form is stepped out pretty much what you see on this slide. So step one, you need to state your reason for going UVP, why you want to actually apply for the UVP. Step two, describe the intended career pathway, and that includes further study of where you see yourself once you leave high school. Where would you like to be, whether it be a career in nursing or construction or plumbing or whatever it may be. We'd need you to put that down into the form. Step three, you'll actually then have an interview with our careers counsellor, where you'll talk about your career pathways and what options are available to you. Josie, who's our head careers counsellor, is absolutely awesome and has a lot of connections to a lot of different providers, not only tertiary providers, but a lot of the apprenticeship and traineeship sectors that are out there, and she can steer your child into the right direction. And once she's satisfied that your child knows the pathway they want to head down, she'll give them her signature, and that will go onto the form. Step four, student then needs to nominate whether they want to stay in scored English or opt out of scored English. We have students currently doing their unscored VCE program who are unscored in all of their subjects other than English. English has remained scored, and more often than not, it remains scored because they've worked out where they want to go to next has a prerequisite requirement of English only, and as a result, we're able to accommodate that. So just be mindful of that. If one of the prerequisites of where you want to go to next has an English and requires VCE English as a scored, you can remain scored in English and go unscored in your other subjects. Step five, you then need to inform all your other subject teachers. So all your other subject teachers, basically you need to have conversations with them that you're considering going UVP, and they will give you their signature after that discussion has taken place. Step six, you then have to go home and have this, obviously, and this would have already started. It started tonight, discussion with your parents, and obviously your discussion as a student agreeing to the terms of the UVP program. And step 7, finally, it goes back to your cluster coordinator for their final signature, and your cluster coordinator then finally passes it on to myself, the Director of Pathways Engagement, and I basically make the change in the timetable, and you'll see that reflected on sector. So that's the process. Yeah. I think that's the last slide, Jamie. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess look, I would. There's a couple of questions in our Q&A already, but I'll give you maybe 30 seconds to have a think if you do have any questions.
I've seen one there, Jamie, which says, when does the 2-week program commence? It commences at the start of term 4. So I think the start of term 4 is around the first week of October, Jamie, about the 5th, 6th, 7th of October.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, we're, if your son or daughter does the perfect unscored program, they will complete all of their learning outcomes by the end of term 3. However, many students are still working on completion into the first couple of weeks of term 4. But all of our students by the end of week 2 next term will have completed their learning outcomes. That's all of our scored and our unscored students. The scored students, once they've completed those outcomes, then move into the examination process, which is obviously about scoring and ranking, whereas our unscored students have graduated. Does this program help you get into uni? I guess my my answer to that is that. Sorry, I'm just writing a couple of things down here. My answer to that would be that if you're in unscored, you're not going to move directly from school to university next year. All right. If I go back quite a few slides. If I go back to there, you can see that what I'm trying to show in that slide is that the red arrow is a scored pathway straight from school to a degree, whereas the orange and green arrows are more of a step process. So if you're unscored, you may in fact go into a certificate for a TAFE or a diploma at TAFE and then move from there to university. Chatting there, Karen. He's undertaking the UVP currently and is telling me how to. You can't unmute. You're in a webinar, so your questions have to be typed. You can't unmute in this environment. Sorry.
Yeah, that's to Karen. Yeah.
Yeah. My son is so Karen. If you want to type in your questions, or I can call you. What's your last name, Karen? If you can, I don't even know what that is.
It just says Karen M.
Yeah.
I can unmute her, Jamie, if you like.
Okay, that'd be great if you could. That's you, Karen.
I don't think that's Karen M, Jamie.
No.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, kick them out. My son has already been offered an apprenticeship. Could he do the work experience in September, school holidays, and then commence work during the 2 weeks of 4th term? Well, that is possible. I guess the question there is if your son wants to achieve the BCE, they would need to have completed all the learning outcomes by the end of this term. Do there and then do. So then, I hope that's answered your question. We can't guarantee that he's going to get his BCE unless he's completed all the learning outcomes. So if he does that before the end of this term, then he's quite welcome to take up the apprenticeship and do his work experience. He's obviously welcome to do that at any time. However, we can't guarantee that he'll have his VC unless all of the learning outcomes are completed. So if he wanted to go down that pathway, it would be incumbent on him to ensure that he gets all of that work done this term. I'll perhaps give you a couple more moments to ask any questions. There's another one popping up, I think. Okay, your daughter's done a Cert 3 in Allied Health. What could be the next step? Well, I guess if you look at this pathway here, complete the Cert 3, perhaps move to a Cert 4 or diploma, and then move into the workforce, or perhaps from there decide that they want to move into a degree, which could be in allied health, it could be nursing, it could be any number of degrees, but certainly having completed Cert 3 here, the next step would need to be Cert 4 or diploma, because if their final destination is here at a degree, the degree they won't kind of look at a Cert 3. They'll want to know a Cert 4 or Cert 4 diploma before moving into that next stage. I hope that's answered the question.
That's to Diane. Yep.
Yeah. Can she go straight to a diploma from Cert 3? Diane, I would have to defer to our careers counsellor on that one. To be honest, I'm not sure, but I'm sure if your daughter spoke to Josie, she would give her more certainty on that.
Diane, when we're back on site, I'd urge and recommend that your son or daughter make an appointment with Josie Albano. She's up in student services.
Yeah.
And Josie's more than happy to help her or him.
Look, there doesn't seem to be any more questions. What I'll do before we finish this presentation, and thank you very much for your time and attendance, I'll just finish by, I guess, repeating what I said right at the start. The purpose of sending your family the letter last week and having this discussion is to just, I guess, provide you with a little bit more information about what the possibilities are for students who don't complete a scored pathway. It is certainly your prerogative to keep your son or daughter in the scored pathway. Our advice would be that there would, if that is the case, there would need to be a significant improvement in scored assessment if there was to be a meaningful ATAR at the end of it. That can happen, but for many students at this time of the year, they've kind of made the decision that scored assessment is not for them, and we would strongly encourage you to at least keep that conversation going. And Andrew's outlined the process. If you have any concerns around the process, then please email Andrew or myself, and we'll endeavour to get you an application form as soon as possible. We're also available via direct message or email. Please feel free to continue the discussion going forward. But there might be another question.
How long?
How long, yeah, roughly do you reckon it would take to take that? Well, all right, so I can speak to that from personal experience. My son he did a scored sort of pathway, but he actually decided that he wanted to do a TAFE course because it was of more interest to him. So he did 1 year of a TAFE course, and then he went straight from there to second year university. So many universities courses kind of recognise that first year of study, and it's sometimes possible to jump straight into the second year. So sometimes you don't lose any time at all, but it depends on the course that you're doing and what course you're trying to enter. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Andrew.
Yeah, can I just add? I think our generation, having gone through school, came through that system where a score was everything. And I think in more recent times, there are a lot more opportunities for students to get into tertiary institutions without scores. TAFEs, diplomas, certificates, traineeships, apprenticeships. There's a lot more on the table than just a bachelor or a degree at university. Yes, it may take a year longer because unfortunately the score that wasn't achieved at VCE wasn't there, but it doesn't stop someone reaching their end goal. It just may take a little bit longer, but the pathway is still there. And I suppose that's the nature of the discussion that we're having tonight, and nature of the phone calls that we've been having over the last week or so, looking at these reports. It's to basically give all of our students an opportunity to to get to their destination, and we generally are showing interest and concern because like our motto says, every student, every pathway, and that that lives true. It really does. Yep.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say to that would be that if your son or daughter does go down that kind of step, I keep going back to my diagram, but if you go through that kind of stepped approach where you leave school and you go, perhaps to a Cert 4 or a diploma, there would be more support in terms of learning support at Cert 4 and diploma level than there would be jumping straight into a degree. Once you go from school into the degree, you're kind of on your own. And you would think that given the scored results that we've seen, you'd think that maybe that might not be a great idea for your son or daughter to go straight into that environment. It might be better that they kind of step their way through and get some confidence in that tertiary environment, so that when and if they do go to the degree, they're more prepared.
Totally agree, Jamie. Yeah.
All right.
Don't seem to have any more questions.
No. Well, again, I'd just like to thank you very much for your attendance. Thanks to Andrew and to Danny, our technician, who's given us a lot of support behind the scenes here. We hope that at least it's kind of prompted a bit more discussion. Obviously, I would say if you decided to go unscored, the earlier we know that, the better, because then we can spend more time preparing you for that end of year transition. There's another question popped in here by the look of it.
No, it's not, Jamie.
Is it possible to swap? I'll just take a screenshot there.
Yeah, don't. Yeah. Danny, can you stay on the line at the end of this?
Yeah, it's possible to swap. Is it possible to swap after the exams? No, you can't swap up, because once you're in the exams and you've done the exams, you're in the scored pathway, and that will be what occurs. Okay, we might leave it there, and thank you very much again for your attendance.
Is everyone out?